Imagine getting 90% of your business from past clients and client referrals. Well, today's guest, Chad Oyhenart, gets 90% of his business, does hundreds of mortgages a year. And he does it by having a fantastic process. And one of the things I love to do when I get somebody on who has a great process is I start asking them questions about their scripting. What do they say? When do they communicate? How do they communicate? And Chad is very gracious about sharing exactly how he does all that. As most of these things are, it's really simple, but it's very difficult to do consistently. And Chad has been doing this for 20 plus years. He's a mortgage broker based out of the Lower Mainland and been doing this for, as I said, 20 years. I've known him for a long time, and we have a great conversation about how to build a business that really uses communication. And he shares some of his gifting strategies that he's been using for a long time. And I think there's tons of gold in this conversation. You're really going to enjoy it. Hey, I'm Scott Beckford. This is the I Love Mortgage Brokering podcast that we produce every week for over 10 years now. And the whole idea is to give you ideas that you can take and copy and put into your business. I'm always looking for the things that can be replicated. And so hopefully you find that in this episode. Before we jump into that, we'll give a shout out to one of our sponsors, which is OwnWell. So if you don't know what OwnWell is, it's this amazing tool for allowing homeowners to manage and monitor the equity in their homes as well as their ability to their buying power. And I'm telling you, this is a game changer. It's been in the US for over a decade now. And it's just came into Canada recently. And I think this tool is going to be awesome for mortgage brokers because it's a type of email that gets sent out on a monthly basis that you actually want to check out. If you want to jump ahead of the line, they're in sort of rollout mode right now. Go to ownwell.ca/Scott and you'll get access to be able to check it out. Check them out and check out this conversation with Chad. Hey, Chad, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So we met in Whistler, 12 years ago or something?
Well, I think we said we were figuring this out. It was about 10 years ago.
10 years ago, yeah. We were both in there with our wives. They were shopping. It was at Aritzia. And I look over and I'm like, you look like a mortgage broker.
We were the only two dudes in there.
And we didn't look like, the guys that just hang out at the ski hill all the time. Yeah. We looked like mortgage brokers and we started chatting.
I think we were both on our phone. I think we made eye contact. Yeah. And then you asked me, you're like, are you here for the DLC conference?
Yeah. And then, so that's kind of where it started. And that wasn't long after I had started the podcast. And so maybe tell me a little bit about how did you get into the mortgage biz?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the brokerage industry a little over 20 years. I joined my dad way back when. He used to work for RBC. He was a branch manager, retail banking for 35 years. He was one of those guys let go for somebody younger and cheaper. Mm-hmm. He started brokering in the late 90s. I would say 1998 was his first year. And just grew the business very, very quickly. Lots of connections, lots of contacts, being as high up as he was at the bank. And by 2002, he was too busy for his own good and needed some help and sat me down one day and said, I think you'd be great at this. Come and join me. And that was it. Never looked back.
That's what I feel like I'm doing right now with my son. I'm in the process of training him he wants to get in the mortgage biz. And so I'm very excited about that. All my kids have said, you do what you want to do because I don't want to make them do it because it'll never work. And so if they have the natural interest, you did. And so you did it.
And what a journey. Like, honestly, I loved it. Like for the first 8 years of my journey in this business, I was dad's assistant, underwriter, underwrote all the files. Best way to learn. He taught me everything that he knew over 35 years, right? Like learning credit, learning documentation, what to look for, how to talk to clients, how to do a deal top to bottom. And so that gave me the stepping stone to be successful from where I am today.
Right. So I want to ask some questions about, you do quite a few files a year, if you don't mind me asking. So how many files approximately would you say you do a year? And then I want to ask about your team, and then we're going to get into some process and other things.
Yeah, sure. So, I would say, consistently, even with some down years here over the last couple of COVID years, but consistently we're over 100 million. Yeah. I would say if you look at the last 4 or 5 years, we're averaging about 125 million. I expect to be back above that next year, but we're anywhere from, 250 to 350 file account per year.
Right. And so, which is a pretty good file count number. I always think file count is the actual measure of work because, of course,
agreed.
I can talk to somebody in Moncton and their file size is smaller than down here.
Yeah. Christine and I always joke about this. Christine Buman, my partner, and I, we always joke about this, but she does a lot of file count, and sometimes in a year more than me. Yeah. And for half the pay. So we always joke about, that it's not that she's a woman, it's just that she's got the lower volume, the market, right.
But you also usually the pricing of owning a home there is lower and stuff too. So
for sure,
there's trade-offs to that. Yeah. So then, what do you have for support around you to help you do that many files?
Yeah, so I got 2 full-time assistants. I got Warren, who's my senior underwriter, Lindsay, who's my junior underwriter. And then I've got a part-time client care for all my gifting. We do closing gifts. We do mortgage anniversary cards. We do birthday cards, just little touch points throughout the year.
Right. Okay. And so then during the loan process, if I'm a client and I get referred to you or I reach out to you, when do they get involved, and which part are you doing?
Yeah. So I'm still very heavily involved in the business. My philosophy is that I firmly believe that when I get recommended to a client, they want Chad Oyhenart.
Right.
And so I do all the upfront. I do all the intake. The referral comes in, it goes to me. It's, hey, Chad, my brother's looking at buying a place. You did a great job for us. Can you help?
Mm-hmm.
And so I have that conversation. I do all the intake. We do the first conversation. I tell them how the process is going to work. They get the application. Once the app comes in,
mm-hmm.
my team does the underwriting. They'll review it. They'll see what the numbers look like. They'll send it to me. I'll then reach back out to the client and say, hey, we've run your numbers. Let's do an educated sit down. Let's talk about what the strategy is going to be, what you can afford, especially this day and age where you're going to qualify for more if it's a fixed rate, less if it's a variable, because the stress test is different. So
mm-hmm.
we go through all that. So at what point do they come in? All up front, they're behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
They get introduced as soon as that file goes live.
And
whether the client's made a purchase or the refinance goes live, my team will then reach out. Warren will send an email and say, hey, Scott, nice to meet you. I'm Chad's senior underwriter. I do all the back end on your file. He introduces himself at that point.
Yeah.
And then he goes through collecting whatever documentation we need, keeping them updated. So we do some cool things. We do daily updates on the file.
To the client?
To the client.
What about referral source?
Until it's approved.
Right.
If it's a purchase, we do daily updates from the time we get it until subject removal. So that way the client is comfortable knowing, hey, listen.
It probably reduces the number of times they reach out to you as well.
Absolutely. It reduces the stress on the client. It reduces the number of times they reach out, and it reduces the headaches because we've reminded them, hey, listen, before subject removal, we still need these things.
Right.
So it's great.
So, okay, I'm going to ask, a lot of people talk about wanting to do that, but they don't do it. How do you make sure that happens every day? And then what if nothing's going on with the file? So you've submitted it, you're waiting. What does the messaging look like?
Warren and Lindsay both do a really good job. Like, we're old school. Like, I tell them, like, we want to showcase personality here. Like, we get our referrals based on how well we treat clients, and we're very relationship based.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll send an email of, even if nothing's happened, we sent it in yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
We don't hear today. It's not going to come back till tomorrow. We'll just send them a note saying, hey guys, just letting you know, your file's moving along in the queue. Lender's still working on it. We haven't heard anything back. We anticipate it coming back tomorrow. We'll have another update for you then.
Right.
And so just a simple touch point so that they're not sitting there at night worrying and saying, I wonder where it's at. We haven't heard. Now they know, okay, at least we've been told.
Right. And so they'll do the daily updates till the thing is subject removed.
Yeah.
And then what about referral sources? Do you contact them as well?
We do. So that we don't keep them involved of where the file's at.
Mm-hmm.
I send all of my clients, I've been doing this for years, and anywhere in the Lower Mainland or where there is one, but we do personalized $50 Cactus Club gift cards for everyone. I reward the referral.
Right.
So even if they don't reach out or the file goes nowhere, I don't reward how it turns out. I reward the behavior.
Okay. So you do that. So you do like a thank you to for the referrals,
source.
And you must buy a lot of cactus cards.
I do.
You probably get some perks from buying that many.
I do. Yeah.
They go in there like, oh, Chad, they give you a big hug.
The head office staff and the marketing department all know me, and so especially out here in South Surrey where there's a cactus. Yeah, the GM knows me quite well. So. Yeah, I've been to the one in Kelowna.
Yeah. And have you been to the King Taps in Kelowna? Because that's also owned by Cactus Club.
No, but I was at the original King Taps in Toronto.
Yeah.
And that was a great place, but I haven't been to the one in Kelowna.
Apparently it's owned by Cactus Club. And we're not talking about it. Okay. Yeah, that's what I've heard. So in any case, okay. So
I'm up in Kelowna next week. I'll check it out.
Yeah, check it out. Yeah. So, okay, question for you on that. So you give a thank you for the referral, but let's say if it's a realtor that you work with all the time, do you give any updates to the realtor?
All the time. We are updating our people throughout the process. So whether it's our realtor...
how frequently are you doing that? Yeah.
I would say we are doing... Realtors don't need it as much as clients. They're a little bit more familiar with the process, I would say.
And if they trust you.
Yeah, totally.
Like they know Chad's got it.
But we check in, and usually what I do is whether it's my realtor or any realtor working on that file with the client, I'll call them right away and I'll say, hey, listen, we've got Scott's purchase in. Thanks for the docs. It's been submitted. We know we've got subject removal next Tuesday. I'll keep you posted before subject removal if I need anything. And otherwise, you'll hear from me before subject removal, just saying you're all good.
Right.
And then they say, great. I say, if you need anything, check in with me.
Yeah.
And we leave it there. And so what we will do is we'll touch base with that realtor before subject removal.
Yeah.
And we'll say, hey, we're good to go.
Is it usually phone calls or emails you do?
I like to phone. Yeah. I'm old school.
Old school, yeah.
Everything I do is on the phone. I think if you ask any of my assistants or any of the people here around the office, I'm on the phone 10 hours a day.
Right. Just talking to people.
Yeah.
And you're highly relational. So then that makes sense, right? You're not.
That's where you get to build your relationship, right?
Yeah.
You don't get to do it over text and email.
No.
There's something to be said about picking up the phone, calling somebody, leaving a voicemail, hearing a voice.
Tonality.
Yeah. Plus, you can have a conversation that you can have in 2 minutes. It might take you an hour back and forth over email.
Yeah,
like
and
5
you
emails.
miss tone, and you can miss
Totally.
sort of nuance. So, okay, so that's great. So you basically have these two, and then they pick up the file. Really, they get introduced, or they're helping you behind the scenes until this goes live.
Totally.
Then they take the file end to end.
Yeah.
What do you do post closing that you think helps you get referrals? Like, what percent of your business do you? Maybe before I ask that question,
Yeah, sure.
What percentage of your business comes from past clients referrals versus other sources?
Yeah, I mean, like we're 90+%. I would even say 95.
Past client
referral, warm lead, somebody who's worked with us before or knows us, family, friend, colleague, past client for sure. And again, going back a little bit more towards our process. So we do daily updates through a purchase until subject removal. Once that happens, we're weekly update until closing.
And who's doing that update? Is your
Warren and Lindsay? Yeah, they do it all. So Thursdays are weekly update day. We tell clients that right up front. Hey, listen, we're going to update you daily until you've removed your subjects.
And will they do, is that email updates?
Email update. Yeah. We do weekly updates every Thursday until that file closes. We do that for multiple reasons. One, obviously the clients like it, even when there's no other conditions met. We will do.
What do you mean no conditions outstanding? It's all done. It's clear.
Everything's done. Yeah. So we'll do hey, here's what your payment is. Here's what your rate is. We'll keep them updated if prime rate's gone down and it's a variable. We'll remind them, hey, listen, your property taxes are not going to be collected with the mortgage, or they are. Mm-hmm. What it does is it reduces errors coming back at us at 11th hour closing.
Right.
Hey, I didn't know this was a variable. Like, we don't ever have that problem.
Right.
Clients will say, hey, I didn't know my property taxes weren't collected with the mortgage. Like, we sent them 10 weekly updates until their purchase closed. They know.
Right.
And then even then it'll say, hey, there's no outstanding
conditions. Are those
conditions.
automated or those
manual?
All manual.
Yeah.
What program do you use to keep track of everything?
Again, we're old school. So our email folder is built out with client last name and closing date in current files.
And then you move them to archive
and then we move them to funded.
Yeah.
I use Excel for all of my database tracking, client, mortgage amounts, rates, all of that. I've got all my years going back 15 years.
You use
on
a fax
Excel.
machine too? Just kidding.
You remember this though, don't you? I used to fax out my apps.
Yeah.
And,
I remember first line you had to send faxes into them. I think I used an electronic fax even back then, but you had to fax in with a cover letter for your documents.
I've been in this industry a long enough period of time that I remember when I first started back with Dad, I was the gopher. Like, it would be Friday morning and we would try to fax in paperwork for subject removal to MCAP or TD or whoever. Mm-hmm. And if at 10 o'clock in the morning, that fax machine didn't go off, Dad would always look at me and he'd be like, okay, 3 files, take them down. And I'd hop in the car with 3 manila file folders and I'd, stop at MCAP, stop at TD. TD front office girls were always cute.
Yeah.
And I'd say, hey, I need to get this to the underwriter. And she would walk it over there and I'd wait in the front lobby and flirting with her and chatting. And then the underwriter would walk out and say,
your wife?
No, totally. No, but that's what I would do. And then the underwriter would walk out and say, yeah, you're good for subject removal. And
that's so
I'd head back on. And then we're talking 20 years ago. That was
22 years ago, probably, or 23 years ago.
Industry's changed a lot, obviously, but that's the way it used to be, right? With fax.
The thing is, if you do the basics well, technology can certainly help, but if you do the basics well, that's more important than the actual technology.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
So
back to the process. Weekly updates all the way throughout. And again, that's one of the things, like, it's funny because I request Google reviews for every client. Yeah. But anytime I get a lead on Google, I'm almost extra critical of it. Of how did you find me? Oh, you got it on Google. I'm not much of a rate shopper broker. So, are they just looking at me to...
what percentage of business comes from Google, do you think?
I would say not a lot. Like, to be honest, again, it's probably under 5%.
But the thing about having Google's reviews is that the people that are referred will look you up.
That's exactly
all it is. Is like, oh yeah, he's legit. He looks like he's been in business more than 5 minutes.
Totally.
Now I trust my friend, but I also trust this third party.
Yeah, it's an extra validation source, right? It's like my brother referred me, and that's great. But then I can also see on Google that there's been 240 reviews or whatever it is that are 5-star. And if you want to click and read on one of them, a lot of them highlight the process, and we don't ask them to do it. We just say, like, hey, if you were happy with the process, I'd love a review. I'd love a 5-star review if you've got it. Yeah. And everyone highlights that process. Mm-hmm. And they say, we love the weekly updates. We love the daily updates. We love the communication points throughout. Right. Because I think, you're going through this process. It's stressful and clients just want to know where they're at. Yeah. And when you leave that gap of time when they're not being told, maybe that's when they start to wander and they start to talk to their bank, or they've seen another rate. And if you're not talking to them, somebody else is.
Yeah.
And we don't ever have that problem. We very rarely lose files between approval and completion.
Right. But you know what you're doing as well. That helps. You got a good team. I'm going to ask you about, what do you do on the back end, like for, I call client for life, or so that you're getting so many past client referrals and past clients coming back? Or what is your, like, what are your touch points? You do phone calls, emails? Do you send them?
So we do a first payment follow-up call, which is, we'll split that up. Somebody on the team will do it. We usually rotate, but like Warren will take some time doing it. I will as well. So first payment follow-up call is a big one.
When does that happen?
We wait till about a week after the first payment. So like, again, being old school, like we're all on Mac. We use Calendar. Yeah. And we share a calendar. And so
you just book it in there as a...
Yeah. So when the file goes, when the purchase comes in, we put subject removal date in the calendar. So we know. We put closing date in the calendar. We put first payment date in the calendar. So it'll say Peckford, first payment, phone call. And we'll know, quickly look up that file. Your payment was about a week ago. We're just going to call and check in. Hey, your payment should have come out a week ago. Any issues?
Right.
Give us a call back. A lot of time it's a voicemail. We make that touch point. So it's first payment we do. We send out, I send out birthday cards with a scratch and win to everybody, just saying, hey,
Has anybody ever won and told you?
No, I'm waiting.
I'm due. Maybe they have, but it's a small amount, but it was like $10,000. You'd think somebody would send you a note.
I'm waiting. Like, I feel like I'm due. Like, I'm sending out hundreds, if not thousands of these. Like, keep in mind, we do mortgage anniversary, scratch and win.
Yeah.
So that's, what we're talking 200 to 300 a year. So, you're 1,500 easy. We're doing birthdays, scratch and wins.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing $1. I'm doing set for lives. I'm waiting for somebody to be like, I won 50 grand.
Right.
I want that to be like amazing.
Yeah.
Because then they're screaming my name, like my broker gave me it. So yeah, we do those touch points. What I do is every Christmas, because it gets a lot when you've got clients, but every Christmas I do customized Christmas ornaments. I've got a guy that is an old friend of mine. He does reclaimed wood, Christmas ornaments. And he'll do custom ones. Sometimes we do log cabins.
Are you sending out?
I do all my live files for the last 2 years.
Right.
So generally speaking, it's about, 550 to 700.
Wow.
And then so everyone just gets a, hey,
your admin person that you said, how much is that a full-time job doing all these cards? And
it's not, it's part-time. She's actually a teacher. She's a single mom.
Yeah.
She was a friend of my wife's, and she's great. We do all handwritten cards.
Yeah.
And
does she write like you? Just a little heart above the eyes.
I actually have very
feminine hands.
I've been told for a while I got very neat printing.
Okay.
But no, she's no hearts above the eyes, but she's feminine printing.
So happy in a little heart there.
I've never had anyone call me back and say, hey, I know this wasn't you writing it, but anyway.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Okay, so you got that part. If you look at your business as a purchase, refi, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I should have pulled up the numbers for you before I came, but I certainly track all that. I would say this year is more of a balance than in the past, but I'd say we're probably 60% purchase, 30 refi, 10 transfer.
Yeah. And what are you finding right now on the transfer conversations? Are people, because I see people, they're losing files, but really they never had them to begin with because they didn't have a proper plan. But what are you noticing on transfers and renewals versus refis?
I think that's a super important thing. Like, we talk about this around the office all the time. I talk about this with my brokers as well. But, I think the transfer conversation is the conversation as a broker. You just need to be most real about is you need to give them the opportunity to go back to their lender. There's no point competing with your lender if you're going to do all the work and just get undercut at the end.
Right.
You'll be frustrated. They'll be frustrated. Everyone's
actually breaking your trust with the client.
Agreed. And you're breaking your trust with the lender because you obviously put them with that lender when you told that client originally, this is a great lender. I've put you with, Scotiabank because, maybe it was extended ratios when you but whatever the reason was, this is a good lender. I trust them. So you should trust them. So when the mortgage comes up for renewal, you can't sit there and slam your lender and say, this lender's not really great.
Who sold you? It's kind of like when somebody sells you a car and then that's a terrible.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so funny. I give them every opportunity. So I always reach out to my database early. And my first question is always, have you heard from your lender? We should find out what they're offering you. Now, once they do, if I can do better, we'll have the conversation. Okay, listen, they've offered you, and sometimes we know the banks send out a pretty generic renewal. And I'll say to the clients, listen, you can go back to the branch or you can go back to your bank and you can ask them what they're willing to do as their best.
Yeah.
Or here's what I can do. And it is significantly better. And I don't know what the bank's going to offer you. But if you want to work with me, we can get it all done. There's no cost. We usually cover things like legal and appraisal if that needs to be the case on renewal. And we can make it nice and easy. And we can make sure that if rates drop between now and maturity, we'll get you that. In a lot of the cases, maybe 50-50 in that case, the client will say, I'll go back to my lender and see what's up. And some of the time, 50% of the time they'll say, yeah, let's just get going. And then I don't have to ever worry about being undercut because I've laid that groundwork up front.
Yeah, you're not trying to play any games there. And then I found that too. A lot of people it's about there's a refinance opportunity because you're solving some other problem.
Totally.
It's not because if they just sign a paper and it's same, like who do the path of least resistance unless it makes there's some other thing we're solving for.
And especially in the past couple of years that we've just gone through, where a lot of people coming up from renewal, got that mortgage in 2019, coming up in 2020. And we're talking, every rate we're seeing is in the low twos. And so now coming up, they need to have that conversation.
They're having sticker shock.
Of, right? Yeah. I mean, you're going up 5.75 on a conventional variable or 5.5 on an insurable. So that's a conversation they need to have. And yeah, maybe they do need to refi, or maybe they do need to kick the RAM out for some payment shock. So it's a great way, regardless of if I win that business or not, I retain the client. Even if they stay with their lender.
Yeah, keep the client, even if you don't have.
Because I say to them, I'm the one that reassures them. I'm saying, listen, yes, Scotia's offered you, or whoever, First National's offered you a great renewal option. You guys don't need any more money. I could move it. We could maybe save 5 basis points. You can go back to First National, see if they can match it. But for no paperwork and signing the renewal, that's the reason I put you with that lender in the first place. I think you should just re-sign.
Yeah.
And so then they come to me 2 years down the road when they're looking to sell and upgrade.
Yeah.
So I haven't lost them because that trust is there.
Right. I had a guy, one time we bought this espresso machine. And so we're having issues with it and we're bringing it to fix. And then he tells us it's a terrible espresso. He basically like, this is terrible. Like you need to buy. And I'm like, you sold it to us a year and a half ago. And now you're telling me it's crap.
Totally.
So my trust in him was gone. I'm like, this guy, I will not buy anything from you anymore because all you cared about was basically selling. He sold me this thing. It was a lemon. Then he basically mocked us for buying it and told us we should buy something else. And I'm like, if you mock your lender and say, oh, they're terrible, you put them there, give your head a shake.
It's so true. But I think the renewal, like when mortgages are coming up for maturity, I think the renewal opportunity for brokers is lost. I think most brokers think they need to win the client to move the mortgage to get paid. Whereas I look at it like all you need to do is make sure that client is still your client.
Win the client.
Win the client. So if that means they stay with the lender, you advise them to do that.
Right.
Because you put them with that lender in the first place.
Right.
If you can do better because, the bank isn't offering them something great, well then great, move it. I consider that free business.
Right.
But if they don't need any more money, the rate's going to be the same. You're good with that lender anyway. Put them back with that lender.
Do you ask for review at those conversations?
I don't, but what it is it's maybe you haven't talked to them in a couple of years.
Right. But I mean, it'd be a good time to insert another review card. Hey man, you know what?
That's a great takeaway.
Here's a 5 basis points or whatever. Go back to your lender. And if you don't mind, give me a review.
Love it.
And then I always say there's 2 types of capital in every file. There's real capital, which is you get paid, and there's social capital.
Yeah.
And there's files that you shouldn't be doing straight up. Totally. And so then go get the social capital from it.
Totally.
Because
your job as a broker is not to do every file. Your job's to find the files that work and the clients you want to work with, right?
Yeah, that's really good. I want to ask you about fixed versus variable. What are you noticing now? Because the market's changed a lot in the last year. So what are you? Everything
I'm doing right now that I can qualify clients on is variable.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big economics guy.
Yeah. So what does that conversation look like? If I'm a client and I'm talking to you, because I'm also a variable guy.
Yeah.
And so what would that look like if we're chatting about mortgages, and like, how do you educate me around?
First thing I always tell clients is, listen, I'm going to share with you some stuff that I know. And I tell them this, that my opinion is based on what I read. We read a lot of economic news. Like we get all the bank economists, we get the Scotia and the Bentels and the TD economic updates.
Yeah.
We take it all in, but we also got a lot of private think tanks like Mortgage Logic. Got Ben Rabideau, like all of these guys that have great content. You got to read it all to pick up on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're reading all these different economists, you can pick up on what a consensus is looking like. Right. And so my opinion's then formed on that.
Right.
And so that's what I'll tell clients first and foremost. And then I explained to them, like, if we go variable, here's what we're looking at. We're starting with a higher rate. So I'm going to give you what your payment's going to look like. It's going to be a bit of a shock. But in order to understand what decision we need to make, you have to understand what's coming down the pipe.
Right.
And, with a lot of, like, Ben Tal had that CMB ABC interview this Monday, talked a lot about, their CIBC's expectations is Bank of Canada is going to cut upwards of 200 basis points by the end of next year.
Right.
Milton Friedman, old economist in the US, like I
like the old school guys sometimes.
He's so quotable for me, but he said, like, one of the things he said is the best time to be a variable rate client is at the peak of the market.
Right.
And so one of the things I always tell clients is,
that's a great line.
I've been in this for over 20 years. And I don't think a broker in the last 20 years could sit here and say to you when the peak of the market and interest rates has until now.
Right.
We know we've just come off the peak.
Yeah.
Right. We know that the central banks and the US Fed, they're going to be lowering rates.
Yeah, they're aggressively.
Rates went up because inflation went up. We had to curb spending.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that we've come off of that peak, we know rates are only going one. We're only talking about rates going down.
Right.
We're not even talking about rates staying stable. And in economics, things don't move that fast. So if you're only talking about rates going down, we know we've got a long runway before we get to a plateau. And then maybe even start talking about rates going up. We're years away.
So then with that client, if they're in a variable, then do you tell them, like, what are you advising them partway through? So if you see a bunch of rate cuts and it goes down over the next 200 basis points, do you reach out and say, hey, look at get locking in, or would you just ride the variable, or are you're not going to decide that yet?
Yeah, I don't think you can decide.
No, I don't think you can either. I guess
I think the challenge
I'm trying to get you to read the future for me. Tell me.
Read the future. I think there's a big growing sentiment as well in economists who are saying, don't expect it because the Bank of Canada is going to cut by 200 basis points. You're going to see fixed rates go down. Like, the fixed rates pricing is almost already baked in.
Yeah.
And so, maybe we see a little bit of adjustment in fixed. Maybe they come down a quarter or a half a point, but the biggest movers are going to be in variable.
Yeah.
So what I am saying to clients is, let's get on the train of riding the variable rate downwards.
Yeah.
And then when we do go to lock in, we'll have that conversation. Is it the right time to lock in? Let's look at your variable. Let's see what fixed are at.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a special we can get. Maybe there's not. I mean, point being is, I say to my clients all the time, I have this conversation 30 to 50 times a month with past clients who are in variable, is I'm always accessible.
Right.
So we're going to put you in a variable. If at any point you ever want to reach out, I don't care if it's monthly, if it's every 6 months, whatever, you reach out and you say, what's going on in rates? How's things going with Bank of Canada? We'll set up a 10-minute phone call.
I mean, there's many reasons why you're successful, but that's, a lot of people don't do that.
No.
A lot of people will not. They just want to love them and leave them and
totally,
and not, just next, move on. And so the fact that you are so accessible and willing to talk to your clients, I think that's good. You'd said something about how you're going to pay a higher rate now. I used to say, good golfers are always thinking about the next shot. Like, you don't just get out to the tee and smash the ball if that's actually going to put you in a bad spot. And it's the same thing with when you're planning your mortgage.
Yeah.
You're thinking a couple shots ahead.
Yeah,
You're planning to be, I want to be here so that the next one is the approach. And so I think that good mortgage brokers need to be thinking further ahead than, like, right now.
Totally. And it's a strategy. And one of the things we talk about as well is, it doesn't mean that fixed rates aren't a good option for some, but we have to look at, like, every file is looked at differently. And really, sometimes if you've got the client that really wants to qualify up to their max, and we know what the stress test is doing to everyone right now, but you're saving, as of today, 1% between fixed and variable. That makes a difference on qualification. And so maybe it means you do have to take a fixed. And we lay that out.
Yeah.
Listen, we're going to take a fixed. Here's what we can look at. We can look at shorter term 3-year. We can look at 5-year, what's most comfortable for them. And then, but just know that as variable rates start to come down and maybe your rate loses a bit of the luster, you might not be able to get out of it, because we know what IRD penalties do when you go from high to low, right?
Right. That's really good. Okay. So is there anything I didn't ask you about that you think would be helpful for listeners? Thank you, by the way, for letting me come chat with you in your office.
This is our second time.
Yeah, I know.
Right? What do you think? What do you think of the space?
I think the space is amazing. Yeah. So if it's called Co-Broker.
Co-Broker.
CO-BROKR. There's no E.
Yeah.
But it is 4 or 5 different mortgage broker companies and a lender all in one office.
And a lawyer.
It is sexy.
Yeah. So we're right in downtown Old Cloverdale.
Yeah.
We took an old building, 80-year-old building, gutted it to the studs.
Yeah.
Spent a heck of a lot more on a reno than I think we wanted to, but I mean, that's what
it is. Nice in here.
Yeah, it's beautiful. The builders did a good job. We had a designer help us design the space. So yeah, we put our time and effort in here, but yeah, we've got I think there's brokers from 5 different independent companies.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a lender in here, First Circle, and we've got a lawyer in here who meets clients, and we do monthly meetings.
Yeah.
And we'll invite some other people that aren't in the space, but we'll do monthly meetings just as collaboration.
Yeah.
And we just share things that are working. Well, like last meeting, we talked about how, what's everyone selling right now? Are you going variable? Are you going fixed? What are you seeing on discounts?
Yeah.
It's a super cool space
it's like
to be
a co-working
collaborative.
space for mortgage brokers.
Yeah.
I think
I think it's what people have been missing through COVID, right? Like you were on your own, you didn't have it. And a lot of these people maybe don't have in their networks, they're not part of a brokerage that's part of that.
Right.
And so it's, I think, we're certainly seeing it because we're full, but it's space that people want to be part of.
Yeah. It's very sexy in here.
Yeah.
It's, we have a saying that was Denise and I always talk about build things sexy enough to sell. And so this would be it. So, well, where do people find you online? They're looking for you.
Online, I think I'm at my website, chadoyenhart.ca, my mom's favorite spot to go find my phone number. But I don't push a lot of people online, I'll be honest with you. Like Google reviews, if somebody wants to
type in your name, they'll find you.
They'll find me.
And we'll put links to the show notes and everything. So,
yeah.
Well, hey, man, thanks for me letting me come chat with you. And it was great to reconnect.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks. Good. Always good to see you. Hopefully it's not another 10 years before we do this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks again for listening. Hopefully you got some inspiration from my conversation with Chad and some ideas. I always find, when you get these conversations, getting into the specifics of asking what do you say when allows you guys to, when you're listening, to hopefully pause it or you write that down and go like, hey, I'm going to copy that or I'm going to adjust what I say in those conversations because I think it's very powerful. So hopefully you found it useful. As I always say, there's no problem in your mortgage business that someone else hasn't already solved. Your problem is who's got the answer. Hopefully these podcasts provide some of those answers. Thanks again for listening. And I will see you on the next episode.